We've spent a number of episodes talking about the women's basketball team, looking back on their season, but there's one player who may have the highest ceiling of anyone on the roster coming into next year.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. You are Locked On Hoosiers, the one and only daily IU podcast. We're also a part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Free and available anywhere you guys listen to podcasts, including on YouTube. Let us know what you think of the new graphics we've been throwing up for the last couple of weeks for the show. I love them. I would love to hear what you guys think on them, though. You guys can subscribe to us wherever you listen to us at. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm your host, Jacob, as always. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, you're going to get a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Before we dive into women's basketball stuff today, got to give a shout out, some praise to the Denver Nuggets, who won the NBA title this week on Monday. And Thomas Bryant, we mentioned, he wins a ring. Didn't really play a whole lot in the playoffs, but wins a ring nonetheless. One person I totally forgot to mention was on the coaching staff. I had just forgotten he was on the coaching staff. Jeffries was on the coaching staff for the Denver Nuggets, so he's winning a ring as well. So plenty of IU ties in that championship for Denver. Let's talk about the women's basketball team and two more returners who are going to have big roles on next season's team, in Sydney Parrish and Yarden Garzon. Let's start with the veteran in Sydney Parrish, who was the big get of kind of the transfer portal season, basically, last year for the IU women's basketball team. And even at the time, knowing how she played at Oregon, it felt like a really big deal to land her. Watching what she did for IU this season made it abundantly clear how perfect of a well, first, I should say how big of a get it was to get her as a transfer, but how really perfect of a fit she is for this IU team and Teri Moren style of basketball. Look, this was a surprising season for her. She did not show this at Oregon, which I think is more based on how Oregon used her than anything else. Oregon used her a lot kind of as a spot up shooter. At IU, she had a lot more freedom to do a lot more things, and it led to a lot more production. 12 points per game was a career high. 5.4 rebounds per game was a career high. 1.8 assists was a career high. 1.6 steals. She was far and away more efficient from the field. 44.8% last season. 36.7% from three was a career high. Just a banner season for her, just across the board. So it was an unexpected season. I think everybody, or a lot of people, or the expectations, however you want to phrase it, for her coming in was for her to be a very solid contributor to this team. It's just the way she ended up doing it. I mean, the coaching staff might have known it. Those very close to the IU program might have known it, but as outsiders looking in, I don't think any of us expected her to play this way, play this well. And it was just kind of the freedom, the play style she was given at Indiana, how much it differed to what she did in Oregon. She was allowed, able to ask to play make, get to the rim, be a facilitator at times. We talked a lot about when Grace Berger went down, how Chloe Moore McNeil stepped up. It was a group effort. There were a lot of people that had to step up, and Sydney Parrish was among them that filled that void as a ball handler, as a playmaker. those types of things. And it's those types of things that IU is going to need next season. We're going to talk about that, but Parrish is very much someone who could do that. She was just a glue girl. I mean, she did so many things that IU needed. We just kind of rattled off all of her stats. Whatever this team needed, she was more often than not the player that would step up. She rebounded exceedingly well for her position. I don't have IU's team stats pulled up. I think she was second on the team in rebounding. She was. Mackenzie was first. Sydney was second. Garzon was third. She defended at a very high level. She deserved to be on an all defensive team. It was insane that she was not an all Big Ten defender. She defended really well and gave IU some size and some length on the perimeter that they had lacked in years prior. She got to the rim. She shot 4.4 2-point attempts per game after basically being at 3 per game the 2 seasons prior. She was allowed to create more inside the arc and not be as much of a spot up shooter. And it meant that she shot better from the field overall. Cause I mean, closer you get to the rim, the better you're probably going to shoot. Her free throw rate skyrocketed. She was just a more efficient player. Now, oddly, her free throw percentage went down and was the worst it's been in her career, despite going from 1.3 attempts per game to 3.1. But that was about the only thing that went down for her this season is her free throw percentage. And then naturally she shot threes as well. Her 3-point rate was down from her last season at Oregon. It was up from her freshman season. She still shot a fair amount of threes, but that wasn't the only thing she was asked to do. Her rebound percentage was up. Her assist percentage was up. Just her usage percentage was up from her last season at Oregon. There was just a number of things she did to contribute to winning is probably the best way to describe it. And the advanced numbers read that out as well. She contributed to winning, and that would take different forms on different nights against different opponents. IU might have needed her to be more of a 3-point shooter on some nights, and she did that. At times when Grace was down, they might have needed her to be a little bit more of a ball handler, and she did that. At times they needed her to be a defender, and she did that as well. And she did it all very willingly and did it all at a high level, and very, very much someone that was important to Indiana's Big Ten title this season. For her to come in and just kind of as seamlessly fit into this roster was impressive. She obviously stepped into the starting lineup once Grace went down, but she never stepped out of the starting lineup. And that was a testament to how well she played right away for the Hoosiers, whether off the bench, whether as a starter, no matter what they asked her to do. She did it at a very high level. And it was a fantastic season. I think better than most anybody could have expected from her last year. And I'm really excited to see what is in store for her now. Even more freedom, expectation put upon her probably offensively to help carry some of that load. And we'll talk about that. But based off the jump she took last season, it could be a really fun and impressive year again next season. Now, if we're talking surprising seasons, I'm not sure anyone had a more surprising season than Yarden Garzon in her freshman year. We'll talk about her and why I think the sky is the limit for her looking forward. Before we do any of that, though, you guys know how much we love Bird Dogs around here. One of our newest sponsors, because they make you look good. They're stretch khaki shorts and are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a sculptured look. They do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of that kind of stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed that issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki shorts but stretches, so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice any sort of movement. They also use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. We know how humid it gets in Indiana, so that one is a of particular note. And as we mentioned at the opening of the show, go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege today. Enter the promo code lockedoncollege, and you're going to get a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for that free Yeti style tumbler. You don't want to take your Bird Dogs off, or excuse me, you won't. You don't, you won't. You're not going to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. Big thanks to you guys for making us your first listen every single day. Every dayers Friday on the show, we're going to have a bit of a fun episode. We did some Locked On polls across Locked On Big Ten. A lot of it was football related, but there were some basketball related topics we discussed, ranking every school in the Big Ten. So we're going to have a couple shows worth of content from that, but we're going to look at the best basketball programs in the Big Ten, best athletic programs, what our Locked On Big Ten cast and crew said about that one, where I voted in them as well. So be sure to tune in on Friday for that. Let's talk Yarden Garzon, because there at least was some level of expectation of what to of what Sydney Parrish was going to do for the Hoosiers this season. Now, she exceeded that, but we kind of had some form of an idea. Yarden Garzon was a complete unknown quantity. She's someone we mentioned in last summer because she played at the Euros. She was playing international basketball. She's been doing that for the last week as well. She's playing Euros for Israel, but she, like, nobody really knew about her as a recruit other than, again, Indiana's coaching staff. She was in the starting lineup from game one, which I think surprised a number of people. We talked a lot about what the starting lineup would look like, and coming into the season, we just thought IU was going to kind of start small, and it would be Grace, Sarah Scalia, Sydney Parrish, Chloe Moore McNeil, and Mackenzie Holmes. And you just have four guards around her. We did know Yarden Garzon existed. She started from game one. She flew out of the gate. She scores 19 points in her debut, hits 5 3-pointers, and that set a tone for the type of player she was going to be this season, which was an instant impact, high-level performer that nobody really saw coming, and just an incredible season for her. I mentioned this a number of times. For a freshman to come in and play at that high of a level for that type of team, IU was the number 2 team in the country. They were the second best team in the country last season during the regular season, and I put kind of more weight in that than I do the tournament, with it being kind of a one-off crapshoot. So for the vast majority of the season, IU was the second best team in the country. Yarden Garzon was not just a starter on that team, but on some nights, the best or one of the best players for the Hoosiers. And that's an incredible feat that I think almost kind of became normal with her pretty early on. Just some of the performances she had. 19 points against Vermont. I don't think a lot of us really remember the Auburn game in Las Vegas for a number of reasons. That's where we thought we lost Grace Berger for the season, but it also was a place where you couldn't watch the game at all. Mackenzie Holmes had 26 points and 12 rebounds on a perfect 10 for 10 shooting in that game. But Yarden Garzon had 21, 6, and 6 in that game as well. She had a number of hot shooting games. She had a number of double-digit rebound games. She had a double-double mixed in there. And it was just all around really impressive to see her playing at this level for the Hoosiers just out of nowhere. Her three-point shooting was, I wrote down valuable, but that almost doesn't even describe it because it was one of the best in the country. She ended up shooting quote unquote only 45.8%, but that's after spending most of the year north of 50%. So it dipped down a little bit, but it was still the fifth best 3-point percentage in the country last season. And it was on a high volume, 4.8 attempts per game. Like she was getting shots up and making them at a very high rate from day one, from the get go. She was a remarkably efficient scorer. 45% from the field, 45% from three, 86% from the free throw line, 11 points and 5 rebounds as a freshman on a team where at best on like her good nights, she's the third option for that team. She wasn't someone that was counted on coming into the season, which is what made her season so special, so unexpected, so many of those words that you want to use. She's also someone that creates matchup issues. She's a forward. I think she's more of a forward. I'm looking at her stats page. They list her as a guard. She's certainly more of a forward who obviously can rebound really well, but was also an above average ball handler for her position. And I think there's a lot more to that, to her game. And so it created a number of matchup issues. There were a number of nights where she really racked up the rebounds against Wisconsin, had 7 assists. Excuse me. She racked up the assists, 7 against Wisconsin. We mentioned the 6 against Auburn, 6 on the road against Michigan State. That came in a loss. And she also had 5 turnovers in that game. But that was at a time when the Hoosiers needed more ball handling and playmaking, and she did that. Same with the Penn State game where she had 5 assists. Like, she was someone that really could distribute, and again, just coming in out of nowhere and doing this right away for a team that was competing for a title. I don't think it can be praised enough. Like, she fit like a glove right away and elevated this team. And again, for a freshman to do that, you just kind of look big picture. Whatever, it wasn't quite the same way in that whatever the team needed, Yarden could do, but what she did at a really high level, and it elevated the ceiling of this team. They're not as good without her. And for her to just fly in, figuratively and literally from Israel, and play like this has me really excited about what the future could be. And I want to talk about what her future could be and why I think it is sky high here in just a moment. So kind of looking forward to next season, as we did in the previous episode, talking about Chloe Moore McNeil and Sarah Scalia. Everydayers, I'm sure you listened to that episode. Those that might have missed it can go back and listen to it after this one. I got a message on Twitter, and it was a fair one, about why we didn't mention Sydney Parrish when talking about leadership and kind of stepping up with Chloe Moore McNeil and Sarah Scalia. I only didn't mention it because that wasn't an episode where I wanted to like talk about her. I trying to give everybody kind of their own episode, or 2 players their own episodes. Sydney Parrish absolutely fits all of those bills. Like, IU is going to need her to be that calming presence, that leader, that player that knows what the situation calls for, that type of person. They're going to need her to be that next season. They're going to need Chloe to be that. They're going to need Sarah Scalia to be that. They're going to need Sydney Parrish to be that. I think what you also can rely on with Sydney Parrish is a bit more of kind of that scoring and playmaking and the actual counting stats late in games. And we saw it a little bit at times, especially when Grace went down. We saw Sydney become a little bit more of a playmaker, have the ball in her hands a little bit more, for better and for worse at times. But I mean, you think back to that UNC game for Sydney and the role she played in that, and those were the types of games she was having. She scored 24 points against UNC, 9 of 15. Had 1 assist, but was a lot more. There was a lot more asked of her, and she's not going to consistently be a 24 point per game scorer, but she's someone that I think can get to her spot, can get to the rim, can be that playmaker. When the situation needed a big shot, it was Grace Berger last season. I could see there being a lot of two-man game with Sydney and McKenzie, and maybe it ends in McKenzie's hands, but Sydney is certainly good enough to keep defenses honest. And if they try to cheat towards Mackenzie Holmes, she can make them pay with three-pointers, with mid-range jumpers, with drives to the rim, whatever that may be. So she's absolutely going to step up in that type of role for the Hoosiers next season. She's going to be asked of it, I should say, and I suspect she will be able to step up in that role. Garzon is the one that I think is a fascinating player to watch moving forward. I think she could be as good as anyone in the country, and this is about as hot of a take as I typically have. I'm not someone that typically fires off hot takes, but I was so impressed by what she did from day one, and she also has kind of the base foundation of someone that could be really, really good moving forward, and it's her ball handling ability and her playmaking potential that I think could lead to her being as good as I think she could be, and that's up there with the best in the country. I mean, it was one shot in one moment in one instance, but think back to the Miami game, and I know that's a painful sentence to say. The Hoosiers tied that game very late off a Yarden Garzon step back three-pointer because she has an array of skills that force the defense to kind of not just sag off of her or crowd her, and she was able to create the space. And I think it's that type of play that she's going to hopefully eventually be able to make, where if a defense is tight on her, she can take one dribble and then step back and shoot like she did in that game, or maybe she just straight up blows by the defense, or maybe if they sag off of her too much, she has a three-pointer. There's a lot of projecting, a lot of assuming that she becomes something of a player, but she has the body, the skill set. She flashed the potential. I think she could really, really be someone special for the Hoosiers. And if we're talking about, there's a number of ways that she can step up for Indiana. Just the sheer scoring that is gone with Grace, I could see that being an area where Yarden Garzon fills that void, and her scoring takes a big increase, which it was already 11 points per game last season. But there are a number of ways I think you could use her and improve her. She's still largely, I don't know, largely the majority of her shots were three-pointers. That is statistically true. There's more potential to be tapped into there. I think you could run some pick and roll actions with her and Mackenzie Holmes that puts defenses in a really awkward position, because Yarden was basically the power forward last season. So if you're being guarded by a bigger player and you're putting them in an uncomfortable position, then she can take advantage of that and get to the rim and score, or hit those three-pointers if the defense doesn't come out, or find Mackenzie Holmes if the defense overreacts. So I think there's a number of ways that IU could use her and really unlock her even further. And I trust that Teri Moren and her staff will be able to do that. So these are two players that I think are going to step up in a number of ways, in the kind of figurative sense in terms of the leadership and being veterans, sure. But I think statistically, these two could step up and have really big seasons. It's a little bit different from Chloe and Sarah Scalia. Those two, we talked a lot about the almost kind of the intangibles of what they'll bring. And there certainly is tangible stuff that they can do as well. But with these two, I think their production could be a little bit more tangible. And again, that's not to say they can't bring the leadership or anything like that. But I think they have the skill set and the ability to take a step forward and become more productive statistically and fill that void left by Grace. So let me know what you think. Do you think I'm way off balance with this Yarden Garzon take, that I think she could be one of the best players in the country? What do you guys think is her potential? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube, over at Twitter, or in a review over at iTunes. Thanks again, guys, for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every single day. Every day is Friday on the show. We'll talk best basketball programs in the Big Ten, best athletic programs in the Big Ten, best fan bases in the Big Ten. We'll do all that on Friday, so be sure you guys tune in. You don't want to miss that. We even have fancy graphics for it and everything. Follow us on Twitter if you have not already. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave a rating and review. All of that great stuff. Most importantly, though, guys, I hope you get through your Wednesday just fine. And as always, LEO.